All right, fair enough.
So yeah, anything goes. Do you know that? Does anybody know that saying? Nothing human is foreign to me. Somebody Google it and see if you can come up with a. See if you can come up with a person. I forget exactly who said it. I know somebody did. So, you keyboard warriors out there.
Was it Terence?
Oh, could have been the Roman poet. Yeah, yep. That sounds
Yeah,
about
that's
right.
the first thing that came up. So.
Was that the exactly right quote? Nothing human is foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, Terence. All right, cool. So mountains and caves. Hello, Alexis. Hello, Lauren. Hi again, Chloe. Good to see you again. Or good to see your name typed out on the black background, anyways. So we are on to mountains and caves for this discussion. And mountains, if you are familiar with mythology, might seem sort of obvious because there's a lot of mountains in mythology. Mount Olympus, for example, is where the Zeus lives, and Mount Abraham takes his son up Mount Moriah to sacrifice him on the mountain there. Pyramids are structured in the form of mountains. And I mean, it just never ends. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And all of mythology, or, huge swaths of mythology connect with mountains. But it's also interesting and equally true that caves are way more common than you would think. And when you start sort of perking your ears up for the presence of caves in mythology, you start finding them in a lot of different places. The great mythologist Mircea Eliade said that mountains symbolize physically the highest point, but the physical manifestation of the highest point is the psychological manifestation of the deepest point. So the people who go up to the physically highest place also attain the deepest levels of themselves, and that's where they meet God often. But it's also true that caves represent the womb. Caves represent the deepest, innermost parts of ourselves as well. And so you find them regularly and often in mythology all over the place. So there are lots and lots of stories to tell. Sam, what did you get excited about this week? Mountains, did you say?
Yeah, well, I got excited about mountains, but also caves. I was listening to the Kalevala, the Finnish epic. Did you guys talk about the egg, the Finnish epic?
I think I may have briefly alluded to Pangu, the Chinese version of the story.
Okay, so I could tell basically the first chapter of the Finnish epic, the Kalevala, shows the creation story.
So the Kalevala is the national myth of Finland.
Finland, yes. Northern Scandinavia, the northern,
Yeah.
And the first chapter of it is essentially the creation story, and it's how the hero of the story gets born. But in so telling it, it tells how the world is created. And there's some cool connections because I learned I was just, I'm reading about mountains, and then I read something that just blew my mind. What would it be? I almost have to so temples themselves. I was looking up mountains, and then I looked up temples, right? You talked about temples. And I also I study Coptic, Egyptian Christian language, and the word for mountain and monastery are the same word. So,
really?
So if you take a test on it, it's like in the chapter 1, and it says, Pata'o, the mountain, you have to put also the monastery, or you could get it, you get it wrong. Like old man is also monk.
And I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. This blows my mind. In Coptic,
yes,
the word for mountain and the word for monastery are the same word.
It is the same word. That's how you would. So if you wanted to say I made a flashcard and I put a picture of a monastery on a mountain, because it turns out almost all monasteries are on mountains or they're in
Yeah.
some weird place like that.
Yeah.
And so there's some really cool monasteries on mountains. But so for reasons I think that you just spoke about, how this is somewhat like the highest point in our physical realm, that where we can go up to meet the gods and the gods can come down to meet us.
Yeah.
But it's so in Mesopotamia, I didn't know this. I read a paper, but the foundational myth of the Sumerians is the world mountain. And that's what the ziggurat's about. And they don't really teach that. I have read a paper from the 60s where the guy's complaining about the fact they don't teach it. Because I looked up mountains and he's talking about the mountain, the ziggurats. So this is what it's called. The world mountain is the place where land first emerges up out of the waters of chaos.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They call it the emergent hillock.
Yeah.
Like the first land, like the first land ever. This would be where Noah, Mount Ararat would be the first land, the emergent hillock, the navel of the world. Right?
And in fact, the Sumerians may have come from that region, Armenia, Turkey, around there. It's possible, yeah.
What the hell was I saying? But so I was reading the Finnish national, the first chapter of the Finnish myth, and there were so many weird connections that were really interesting. So the myth is this, that there's the air god, and then there's the daughter of the air god, and literally her name means air god daughter. It's like Il Dator. So I think they don't because Thor's daughter is the last name of like Icelandic athletes, because that was the daughter of Thor.
Right.
Her dad's name was Thor.
Right.
That's it. So her name is Air Daughter, and she was a maiden in the sky, and she lived there for eons and eons, and she was got bored, and she got tired of being a maiden in her dad's house in the sky, and so she went down to the waters, and the water sucked. They were windy and salty and turbulent, and she went down into these waters, and basically she became pregnant. And when she became pregnant, she was pregnant for 900 years, in fact, through the process of being pregnant and giving birth to the hero of the story. What's it, Wainamoinen? Wainamoinen, I think is his name.
Oh, yeah.
Or, anyone can correct me. Pronunciation's not my thing. And so the cool thing is this. So imagine that she's the air daughter, the daughter of the ether, the sky father. And so you have waters in the sky, and she goes down into the waters, becomes pregnant, and she's in the chaos waters. And in the process of giving birth, she forms the world with her movements and her thrashing, and where she laid her head created the bays and the fjords and stuff like that, and the coral reefs and the deep seas. But there's a story where she's much like Gaia in our story, the Theogony from the Greek tradition. She's not giving birth. This is 700 years, and she's done all this and still hasn't given birth. And it keeps it, and she still didn't give birth. It still didn't happen. And so she prays out to her father for relief, and a duck comes, or a waterfowl flies around. And so that's when the duck thing comes in, and the waterfowl is flying around. There's no place to land and to lay the duck's eggs. So the air daughter puts her knee up and her head up and her shoulders up, and then the bird lands on her knee and lays 7 eggs, 6 golden, 1 iron. And somehow through the process of sitting and hatching the eggs, which creates heat, air daughter thought she was on fire. And so she thrashed around, the eggs fell down, and it created from the eggs the dome of the sky, and the bottom egg was the yolk, or the earth and the yolk. And they describe how the different the yolk, I think, becomes the sun in the top, and the white's the moon or something like that. And they talk about the different things. And so there's kind of like 2 creation stories,
Yeah, it sounds like
me is the hillock. So that's the thing that as I was reading it, her knee is the first place where land arises up out of the waters of chaos for essentially what is a divine duck. Where did the duck come from? You know, there's no land, there's right, but that's the cool thing
We
about
don't, yeah, we don't ask where Cain and Abel found their wives from.
it's got the lot right. System,
We just moving right along.
yeah. Yeah. But so this, you know, the duck comes and yeah, and that you see more of this, the same kind of mythology of the dome. But her knee is the emergent hillock, is the first place where land comes out. And even in this story, which I just read the first chapter, and I wasn't expecting to hear anything about it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And the cool thing is, you know, Wainamoinen is the baby. It's a story about pregnancy. 900 years is 9 months. So they're talking about the 7-month process. 7 months. She's so getting pregnant. And I have a 5-month-old. So I'm reliving it. You know, this is and then Wainamoinen is birthed, and they talk about the birthing process, and they even talk about like when he's birthed, he falls into the ocean, and he's there for 600 years or something, or 700 years, 800 years, and then right around 900 years, what is he, 9 months old now? He takes his first steps on land, and he looks up, and he does it so that he can look up at the sun and see the stars and see the great bear, which is in heaven, that guides him and all this stuff. But he crawls out of a cave, his mother, and all this stuff. I was reading that, and it was cool, and then I read other stuff. I just thought that was a cool creation story. And yeah, go ahead.
There's one that I love that it connects to it a little bit. It's also got a spirit daughter whose name means spirit daughter.
Yeah.
And it's the Maidu. It's Mount Shasta. Story told by the Maidu Indians up there in north central California. And it connects, I think, in some ways, maybe not in others, but there's bears. And
it's the Big Dipper. That's where they talk about the Dipper in the poem, the Finnish one. Yeah, the bear.
The Maidu story is that Chareya, his name means old man above. That in the beginning everything
Uko or whatever in the Finnish one. It's like Uko, help me.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
So everything was flat, and nothing was here. And Chareya got a rock, and he made a hole. He bored a hole in the sky, and it was there was all kinds of snow and ice up there, and he pushed all the snow and the ice through the hole in the sky, and they all fell down and made Mount Shasta. And then he came down, he's stepping on clouds, and he came down to the top of Mount Shasta, and he put his fingers in the ground, and every place where he put his fingers in the ground, a tree would come up. And as the trees came up, the sun shone through the hole in the sky and began to melt the snow, and so it created these little rivers and rivulets. And Chareya took a branch off one of the trees, and the leaves all became birds. And he took the tip of the branch that he had taken and made them into fish, and he put them into all the rivers and rivulets and streams, and that became all the fish. And they took the middle of the branch and he snapped it, and out of that came all the animals except the grizzly bear. So all the foxes and otters and beavers and squirrels and everything else came out of that middle branch. But the biggest part, the base of the branch, made into the grizzly bears. And the grizzly bears were huge and smart, and they would walk around on 2 legs. And Chareya even got a little bit scared. They were so big and so strong, he got a little bit scared of them. So he went back up to the top of the mountain, and he moved in. He went down inside of it and moved in there. And even to this day, when he throws a new log on the fire, you could feel it. You could see smoke coming up the top, and you could feel the earth shake and everything when he puts a new log on the fire. And one day, the wind was blowing so hard that it was blowing all the smoke from the fire back down into the mountain, and it was getting smoke in everybody's eyes. and it kind of pissed him off. And he told his daughter, spirit daughter, god daughter, what a Tyrea daughter, go up there and tell the wind to stop blowing so hard. And she's like, okay, Dad. And she starts to go, and he goes, but wait, don't stick your head out, because if you stick your head out the top, the wind could catch your hair and it will go take you flying out of there. And she said, okay. He said, just use your hands, talk to him in sign language. She's like, all right. So she goes up there and sticks her hand out and sort of signs, hey, wind spirit, can you not blow so hard? And whatever, and the wind kind of died down. But then she thought, and she was like, didn't Dad say, well, I think Dad told me one time that you could see the Pacific Ocean from the top of Mount Shasta, and I've never seen the ocean before. There's like an ocean part of it. And so she gets curious, the curiosity of women, Pandora and Eve and all the rest. She gets curious and she sticks her head up to see if she could see Mount Shasta. And of course, the wind picks back up and catches her by the hair and flings her out over the mountain. And she goes tumbling down the mountain. And she's kind of laying there all hurt and everything. And then Mama Grizzly Bear comes along and sees her and feels like really soft, like compassionate. She takes this girl home and nurses her back to health and raises her up. And when the girl gets old enough, she decides to marry her to her oldest son, Grizzly Bear's son. And so they get married and they have children, and their children, the children of Spirit Woman and Grizzly Bear, they don't look like either one of them. They're kind of these weird hybrid creatures. But the Grizzly Bear people were really pleased, and so they made them a little camp they called Little Mount Shasta Lodge, and all of the grandchildren lived there. And that was us. We were the children. Grizzly Bear is our father, and Spirit Woman is our mother, and we lived there. The first people lived on the side of the mountain there. And so eventually, when Grandma Grizzly got ready to die, she started feeling bad that she sort of kidnapped. She didn't really kidnap Spirit Daughter, but she kind of didn't try to take her home. she kind of slightly kidnapped her, and so she started feeling bad. So she sent her grandson up to tell Tyrea, old man, about it. And when he heard that his daughter was alive, he was super excited, and he comes, bounding down the mountain, and you could still see his footsteps to this day. He comes down the mountain, and he sees his daughter, but when he realizes that they've been like sort of, keeping his daughter, he gets really mad at the Grizzly Bears, and he curses them. And he tells them, you have to walk on 4 legs from now on. And so that's how Grizzly Bears have to walk on 4 legs. And he also takes away their language, so they can't speak to each other anymore. And so he kind of curses the Grizzly Bears, and he takes his daughter back up to Mount Shasta. When the white people came, old man and his daughter and everybody inside Mount Shasta, all the gods, they just left. They just went back up to the sky. They're like, we can't deal with white people. So there's no more gods in there anymore since the white people came.
That's a cool example where that mountain is the actual physical geographic home, right, of a community of people that made these stories, right?
Oh my gosh. I had never, so the only time I had seen Mount Shasta before was on I-5 driving from whatever Eugene to Sacramento, and you kind of see it there and it's big and everything, and then you pass by and it's impressive. But we drove around Northern California for a couple days last summer, the summer before last, and you can't go anywhere in Northern California and not see Mount Shasta. It is so freaking dominant. It is the most unbelievable. Mount Shasta is
cool,
just unique. Yeah, you can see it from everywhere, from hundreds of miles away. It's just incredible.
And if you were at the top of that mountain, the wind might blow you away.
Yeah.
Depending on the days and the weather and all that stuff.
Well, I was wondering if you could actually see the Pacific Ocean from up there. That's kind of my thing. I don't
know. I've been up to the top once, to the end of the road, but I didn't. I looked.
Did you go to the summit?
Drive. like as far as you could drive. I was doing a construction job up there, and we just drove up there.
Yeah.
So that's the only time I was there.
There were other ways too that the Kalevala story, when you were telling it, it was reminding me of that Mount Shasta one in a couple different places. I think the water, seeing the water and the young girl and the father, and she gets pregnant and gives birth to,
and the actual language is really cool, and it's just a fun, and it's a song, so it's like they're singing, and it's all in meter and stuff, and it's pretty cool. But I thought that was interesting because does the Finnish culture have anything to do with Sumerian? Like I'm not sure. Maybe indirectly through the European nations.
Finnish culture is one of the obscure cultures in Europe. Like nobody's really quite sure. Yeah, the Basque and the Finns, and I want to say the Hungarian. There's another one too, but the Basques and the Finns, their language is not really connected to other languages, and it's kind of obscure where they came from and how they got there and everything. And I know the Sumerians are too. The Sumerian language is like unrelated to all of the languages around it. It's like I heard it put once that the Sumerian language, and that's the sort of the birth of civilization in ancient Sumer, 3000 BC. Their language was as distant from all of the languages around it as Chinese is from English. It is just utterly it's not even close. Right. It is an entirely different language family. And I think where the Sumerian language comes from still baffles people.
Yeah, and maybe it had to do with the fact that they were just some of the first people to, well, I don't know. I was going to say writing systems and organizing and
I was kind of connecting them to Göbekli Tepe up there in Turkey and wondering if they had come down, from Central Asia or Turkey or whatever.
I read a book about sort of that period of history, sort of how did the human race get from sort of the Stone Age hunter-gatherers to civilization, so from like 40,000 BC to say 3000 BC. And one of the interesting things, sort of like to add nuance to the story that people tell, is that places like the lowland marshes of southern Iraq, of the deltas, they would call them, they're like special names for the environments where you can essentially walk around and just pick shit up off the ground. It's because of all the sea life. Like you can just pick up food. Like it's a highly, like with the fish, the fowl, trafficking. You can move up and down the river. You have source to fresh water, but you're also right next to the ocean. So so these are kind of like lush areas that they essentially had a high carrying capacity, meaning like the environment can hold a bunch of people and animals. And some of those areas were like southern Iraq. So it might have been really, really, really an early melting pot area for some of the earliest humans outside of, like it's just the possibilities are so vast because of these types of things. And the Middle East the word middle is perfect for it. It's a crossroads. It should be the crossroads of the world,
And one of the things I remember talking about this last time with you, but it was really interesting, that there aren't really any mountains around there. So they built ziggurats, right?
And it's interesting that the Sumerian culture, which is founded on living in marshland, which means like some of their property is below sea level, their culture is foundationally based around a myth of the world mountain. Like, so and the other thing with mountains, if I could say this, especially once you get into like civilizations, mountains end up they tell the story of like cosmic order, usually, or like, because like as you move up towards the heavens, there's usually steps, like a ziggurat has steps, and and as you move down, and usually the order of the cosmos. So you have like your high gods, you have like Uranus and Gaia, and then you have the Titans, and then you have the Olympians. And then you have the same thing with the Sumerians, the Babylonians. You even have the same thing with the Vedic gods. and the not the Vedic gods, but you have like Vedic gods, and then you have more gods, I think, that later on in Hinduism come in and sort of push other gods back up. Similar thing.
One of the most
Yeah.
one of the most interesting places that does that is Borobudur in Indonesia, and it's this archaeological site that was active in like 1200 AD, and then it got overrun by the jungle, and nobody even knew anything about it until 100 years ago. And I don't know, some French guy was hiking through the jungle and found it, but it's from a lost civilization. It's a Buddhist civilization, but it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site now. They cleared it out and like, holy crap, it's just filled with art. And it's kind of a pyramid, and it does that explicitly. Like at the base is like the carnal desires, the sex and the drugs and the alcohol and the sleep and all that stuff. And then there's like it's levels of consciousness, that begins with kind of our base earthly nature, and as it ascends, as you walk, and the pilgrims would walk up this, at the very, very top is are symbols of Buddha's enlightenment. And so the act of walking up the the thing itself is retracing the steps of higher forms of consciousness and enlightenment.
Absolutely. And that's.
Oh, we have a question.
Oh,
Doi.
So that reminds me, especially your last description there, of Maslow's hierarchy, as far as working your way up to self-actualization. The same idea of working that thing up there. It popped in my head. Sorry.
No, I love Maslow's hierarchy. I love Maslow. What an incredibly interesting guy he was. I don't know if anybody is interested in psychology. Abraham Maslow, talk about a shitty upbringing. Oh my gosh, that guy his home life was a disaster. His mom and dad were both just horrible people, and he overcame, and he put up this. A lot of people talk about it, so you might have heard of it, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which at the base is like basic physiological needs, like we need food and we need sleep and we need physical safety and those kinds of baseline things. And then on the second level, you have like friendship, I think, or I don't know. There's a second level of things that once the base is, then you're free to push your energies into the second level. And then there's a third level, and the fourth, I think, is called self-actualization, or kind of your highest, the best you can be, sort of thing. Did you do any other mountains, Sam?
Well, I wanted to talk about a number of mountains, just like quickly to reference them.
Yeah, me too. I actually had I had the exact same thoughts. So good.
Like I think that okay, we get the point. Lots of these mountains, but just to sort of reference them. So in Egypt, I just wanted to point out. I said that a mountain and monastery are the same word. So of course, ancient Egyptian mythology, the immersion of the primordial hillock, the first where land first comes up, that is the site of every temple. So every temple in Egypt by like the year 200 AD claimed to be the place where land first arose. Well, that makes sense in Egypt because it flooded every year. So land did literally arise every year and go up. So,
we'll go back and forth. So Mount Olympus, we already talked about, but where all the Olympian gods lived.
And that is in the Theogony. It's in the Theogony, when they describe Gaia, Mother Earth, she is the broad-breasted, secure foundation of all forever. And she specifically is described in creating immense high mountains as homes for the gods, specifically.
Yeah.
And so why were the mountains created? For the home of the gods. Like, literally, it's just so that's it says it explicitly.
All of the Shivas and Parvati. There's a place in the Himalayas, I forget what it's called. It's super famous. It's a mountain, but it was thought to be the place where Shiva lived.
Right, and so I even read that. Like Indra slayed the chaos dragon who was keeping all the waters. And then after Indra did that, what happened was the demons retreated to the underworlds, and the gods were returning to the summit of the central mountain of the earth, there to reign from on high.
Yeah.
That's Vedic. So that's the Hindu vision.
There's another one from China. It's called Mount Hemming in Sichuan province in China, and that's where this character named Dong Xiaoling went up to the top and met with Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu gave him the blueprint for how to organize society. And he came back down the mountain and he had all these rules. He divided people into 24 administrative districts and did all these weird, like, bureaucratic things, like how to divide rice. And I thought this was really, really funny. There were all demons around. So he had gotten from Lao Tzu the secret for how to get rid of demons. And what you did is you wrote these special magical words on paper, and then you burned the paper into ashes and put it in water and mixed it in the water. And then people drank the water with the words from the paper on there. And then their interior strength could overcome the demons that were attacking them. And anyways, he started a book called The Way of the Celestial Masters, which actually was this long-standing, influential Chinese school of Taoism that went on for a long, long time.
That's so cool. And that's like talking about what's that? What kind of magic is that? Where that sort of thing where people, where you go, I was, if I know your true name, like it's like a voodoo doll. If I take a piece of hair and then I make a doll out of it, then I can actually do something to you. But it has a word.
Is it sympathetic magic?
It might be sympathetic magic. Okay, we got some nods. And so the idea, just the conception, it's so important because a lot of people today don't have the idea that there are spirits and forces and things influencing us in invisible ways, and that magic, and it's not magic. It's not magic in the sense of, that thing that's not real that everyone knows and it's a bunch of this is the way the world works, and you're able to influence it.
Yeah, tap into it.
You can call that magic.
Yeah.
But only if you know what you are talking about when you're talking about philosophical, or you're talking about Taoism, and you're talking about the way people believe and still do.
Yeah.
If you believe there's a djinn in the drain, and in the heater, and that's why it makes weird noise, you believe, right? I mean, it doesn't matter, it's like.
I must have told you my favorite story. This has got to be, I have lots of stories I love, but this is just way up at the top. I hope I haven't told it in this class before, but oh my gosh, I love the story. So, well, you guys can tell me the story of Niels Bohr, the quantum physicist. Have I told this story in this class about his horseshoe? Okay, so he lived in the 20s and 30s, and he was just like, everybody thinks that Einstein was the smartest person in the world, and yeah, he probably was. Niels Bohr was a very, very, very close second. Like, Niels Bohr, it was a bright guy, and there's like anecdotes that somebody asked Einstein about, I think Einstein about quantum mechanics, and he said nobody really understands it except me and Niels. We're the only people who even grasp it. But so he got a job at Princeton in like the 1930s, and someone went into his office and he had a lucky horseshoe hanging from the wall behind his desk. And the person was like, Niels, they're like, you're the greatest, one of the greatest minds of your generation. You're not going to tell me that you believe in lucky horseshoes, are you? And he laughed and he goes, no, of course not. But I'm told that it works whether you believe in it or not. Which just so perfectly captures the essence of magical thinking, Of course I don't believe in it, but yeah, couldn't hurt.
And can't you wear aren't there medallions of the pages of the Quran that are blessed that you could wear around your neck as sort of a protection thing in Islam?
I know there's Jewish phylacteries, right? There's Jewish ornament lapel boxes that you put bits of the Torah in. I don't know about the Islamic ones.
I'm pretty sure there is, or at least maybe in maybe it's only in certain Shia sects or something like that. But yeah, it's a common thing to imagine that, just talk to your grandma.
Yeah. or these anti-vaxxers, you know.
You know,
Really wearing masks. Haha, you magical thinking people.
oh, magic works, right? You just-
Masks will say. There's a leprechaun. Did a leprechaun bring you your mask?
Hey, Jason,
Yeah.
Native American, they had the spirit shirts that would protect you from bullets and arrows and things that the shaman would bless before they go into battle and everything. I remember reading about those.
Yeah. We have conspiratorial and magical thinking. When I want to make sure I'm clear about that last joke, but masks like prevent spit from flying out of your mouth that could land on something, or somebody could breathe it in and you could get COVID to them. If you don't have COVID, you could, or if you have it but you're not symptomatic, you could spread it. So we wear masks not to keep ourselves safe, but to keep on the lookout for others, right? To be responsible for the well-being of Kim's grandma. If I met Kim, I wouldn't wear a mask for me necessarily, or for her necessarily. She's 20 years old, but I would wear it for her grandma, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why we do it. But you have these people who just have this alternate.
Well, that's the thing. What we're talking about is, isn't it interesting how human psychology works?
Yes, totally.
That's what we're saying. Isn't it interesting how human psychology works?
So prone to magical thinking.
Yeah, and it's very true. I'm trying to think. I mean, I have this. When I looked up the Ziggurat mountain thing, it really had a lot of cool stuff that I think would maybe like almost create like a yin yang Ouroboros wrap around to the abyss kind of thing. Like it talks about the structured layer of the universe. It talks about the moon. It's really interesting. This is a concept about the moon, and I don't know. I think I wasn't there for the moon. Moon and sun. Was I there for the moon and sun? I'm not sure. But the moon, the interesting thing about it is it's imagined as a cup that fills up and pours out the holy, like the energy and life and fire of the universe and the power of the gods. So, and it's what invigorates sort of the world and all of creation.
Doesn't Gilgamesh's mother go up to the top of a ziggurat and pray to her mother, the moon?
Sin or something like that. Like Sin is for the moon.
Yeah.
I think Na means mother or queen. And so here's another thing. I'm sorry, the tangent. Every earth goddess it seems to be a mountain goddess. So that's the other thing that I wanted to bring up when I was talking about with Gaia. She's a mountain goddess. And even the Sumerian goddess is there's a name, and it means it's goddess of the mountains, goddess of the high places. Where is it? Nin Hurashag Ninlil. So Ninlil is the wife of Enlil, so it's right. But this is the mountain version of her. So they just put like mountain Gaia is essentially, and that's something that I didn't really connect before, is that if you are the earth goddess rising out of the chaos, then you are also the mountain goddess, usually, almost always.
Yeah. Well, that's like you said at the beginning, that's Mount Ararat, Noah and the flood, and Mount Ararat rises out of the water, and that's that same sort of picture right there.
The Syrian Baal is a storm god that would be on top of a smoking mountain. That's another one.
So let's go to one mother. I can't pass this by, but also just to know, the Japanese are, I don't want to say they're unique, but they venerate mountains for breakfast. They can't. Japan, the soul of Japan, is always looking at mountains and is extraordinarily reverential. It's like kind of like you were saying with Egypt. Like every mountain in Japan, if you go up to the top of it, there'll be a Shinto shrine up there. Every single one. From the top of the country to the bottom, this kind of mountain pilgrimage and veneration is just all over the place. But I'm going to talk about caves too. and I have some time to
This is
devote
so
to
good.
that.
We have so much to say.
I know.
Um,
It's like mountains. It's like, I think caves are more psychological. It's like when there's mountains, it's sort of cosmological or whatever, like how the world gets created, how the universe gets ordered. Your formula last week was really stuck in my mind, chaos and cosmos as opposites. That's really an important point.
yeah.
But the mountains are associated with cosmos, the ordering principle.
And cosmos means, it has implied in the word order.
Yeah.
Is it's the beauty of when you look out at nature and when the Christian says, I see God in the creation of the earth, that's what we're talking about. It's that beautiful order that people, they can't help but go, there's no way that,
And Christians should get that from this class. I mean, I know we have Christian students, but you should hear that point, because it means that when you believe that your God created the universe and the heavens and the earth and everything in it. That means when you see the beauty and the order of the cosmos, you connect to a religious sense that is far older. It's universal. It is a really, really, really deep universal human connection to look at the beauty and order of the world and be in awe of it.
and caves are like,
I think they're more psychological. It's more like going down deep into yourself.
right. It seems to be that way. Like if caves, if you can talk about mountains, and we talk about them with temples and kingdoms and civilizations and communities and structure and layers and the highest king and the lowest, and all this stuff. Caves are different, right?
Yep.
I'm
still here, so go ahead.
Yeah. Do you want me just to give a quick rundown of the cool, like the old cave and what it's like to go into a cave, and the history of sort of humans and the use of caves and cave art and cave
Absolutely.
writing?
I want to talk about the natural history of caves. Not too much, but I personally, I could go for the whole rest of the time talking about the natural history of caves. But yeah, definitely.
So I'll try and lay it out quickly. So caves, there are two parts to caves and to most caves.
Yeah.
You have what's called, I think it's called a rock shelter, or I think it's called a rock shelter. So it's the first part of the cave. It's the part of the cave where you go in and you make a fire, you're out of the rain, you're out of the wind, you're sheltered, but there's light. You come in and out, and then there are
some caves stay that way, or just the rock shelter.
Or it's simply a rock shelter. There isn't anything deeper.
Right.
But then there are caves that they have deeper recesses, and this is where you'll find sort of like the famous rock art of southern France and Spain, and in these caves, and it's Stone Age, meaning something like 40,000 years ago. Human beings were in Europe, leaving behind these images, essentially written on the stuff.
For people who get stuff mixed around a little bit, agriculture and civilization began 3000 BC, 5,000 years ago. 40,000 years ago, we are talking about an entirely different planet. Everybody's hunting and gathering. There are no cities. There's no writing. There's no farming.
Europe is Siberia. It's not forested. There are rhinoceroses, lions, woolly mammoths, tigers, and bears. Yeah. Oh my.
Stone Age human, you need to really subtract everything you think you know about humanity if you're going to talk about Stone Age. So that's what Sam's talking about here.
And so the interesting thing about caves, you go into a cave, you have the outer shelter, but when you go into the deep part of the cave, there's no light at all. And when you go into a cave like that, some of these places you would have to crawl on your stomach for a half mile to get to where you can stand up or to see, or even you have to crawl on your belly and you're in a tiny chamber where the artwork is there and you're on your stomach, right?
You said a half a mile, right?
Yes, or thousands, like there are miles and miles and miles of caves. Just look up spelunking, whatever it is.
That's insane. Walking a half mile takes a while.
You're crawling and you're in the dark. Okay, so here's something about this that we have to realize, that this cave is something like a threshold. So if you imagine that we're walking on the earth and we're out in daylight, it's Gaia, it's Mother Earth. Here's the celestial sphere. Here we are. But then we go into a cave and we go into a different sphere, right? This is not, when you look outside and there are rivers and trees and plants, you go into the dark part of caves, it is like a moonscape. It is like sci-fi. You don't have plants, you do not have any light. There's no light at all unless you bring it with you. And there's no way to, you can't farm, you can't live in there. Or anything like that. So there's something that happens, and if any of you guys have listened to Joe Rogan, he has a sensory deprivation tank. So there's now studies about sensory deprivation, and that when you're in the dark long enough, not everyone, but a lot of people start hallucinating as soon as, like, it could be 10 minutes, or it might take a few hours, it could take days, but you start seeing things, you can start hallucinating, and it happens. It's like you're not sick or anything, it just happens. You can go do it at a spa. And one of the things that they've studied with anthropology is that in the dark and at night is when human beings are most creative in storytelling and attributions. So like, if you ask me the same question at night as in the day, I might give you a more creative, mystical, irrational answer at night. And it's also when we tell our stories, right? When we sit around.
I remember when we stumbled into this point last time, I was like, one of these, I get my mind blown all the time in these conversations. But you were like, why do we tell stories at night, I think, or whatever. And it was because we do, like, all of our stories we tell at night. And it's like our imagination is kicked in then, right?
And if you tell a story during the day, what do? You make a black theater and you turn the lights down a little low. And when you come out of the movies, you're like, oh,
you're like, too much light.
It was like 4 o'clock. Right? You ever have that experience? Now imagine you're going into a cave and you're going through the most important rites of passage of your entire life. And you're going through a shamanistic experience and you're tripping balls and you're being, no, anyway. Well, a little bit like that. It could be.
Well, really like that, because I can't get beyond the idea that you're on your belly crawling into the dark unknown.
But some.
How, like, that would be terrifying. Like, if you're even a little bit claustrophobic or whatever, like, that's a psychologically extremely significant process to go through.
And now think about this. So you're crawling some distance. If you're going through a rites of passage, say meaning like, you're doing hunting magic, or it's your bar mitzvah in a cave, basically, and it ain't fun, right? There's no singing, or maybe there is singing. We don't know. There could be. They're probably singing. Probably
just sing old Negro spirituals.
Yeah.
Gonna see Miss Liza.
Yeah. So you probably remember you talked about this fire management. So you probably brought maybe a torch, but probably not even a torch. Probably either an ember or even stone lamps. That's another thing I didn't think about. Stone lamps are an ancient thing. So they've had fat lamps and like where essentially you just get some fat on a piece of stone and they have it lit on this, like Aladdin's lamp, but it's just a piece of stone. So but you can go into these moonscapes and then you'd light a fire or you'd light an ember and you'd see these caves under flickering firelight. And they know they're bringing in pigment, so they're using ash, they're using red ochre, like minerals. They're using different minerals to draw. Now here's the thing: most of the stuff they draw they're not representing anything. It's geometrical. It's dots.
Yeah. Right. So like percentage-wise, we all on the front of all the art books and stuff. When you see the cave paintings in France or whatever, they always show the bulls and the the animals,
reindeer and the ox, and
because that's what sells. But I was last time Sam pointed out that's like 5% of the art down there. All of the rest of it, 95% of it, is geometric doodling, right? Is that about right?
Yes, and almost all of it is geometric, and the geometric artwork was started by Neanderthals. not started by like they created it, but they were doing it in Europe before human beings were in Europe, about tens of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And humans were doing it in Africa and other places.
Yeah. Australia.
So, and Australia. So that's the other thing is, so they've started collecting, I don't know, whatever. They started gathering all of the, like doing data work and all of the different sites and the different symbols. And I want to look at this because it blew my mind, and I'm just like, where's mine? They're all over the world. So there's like, they've identified 32 sort of tick mark symbols, a palm of a hand, a cross.
Can you share your screen?
How do I do that?
On the button, if you move your mouse around, there's
Share
a
screen.
bright green share screen thing.
Okay.
And then it'll give you all your windows. So
did that work?
it says, yep.
You see an
yep,
orange
yep.
thing? So let's see. So this is the European sort of collection that they said over about 30,000 years. And these symbols somewhat stayed consistent over culture and time and location. So think about this. These symbols were there in the caves before humans were here. Okay, in this
Homo
area.
sapiens.
Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens Neanderthalis were the ones who were doing it already.
Yeah.
Also, human beings were doing it in Africa and Southern Africa and East Africa. And I'm not sure when these other in India, China, Myanmar, Borneo, all these other, I'm not sure when that's dated, but I do know Australia, I think they were there 40,000 years ago. So, right. And then North America as well. And so that's the other thing. So they crossed over, and so there's big questions. Does it have any meaning? Are they symbols for something? Is it shared? So it's like there's all these new questions, and like, is it proto language? Is it just, or is it like Joe Rogan says, they're tripping balls and they're seeing things and they have fire going on and then this happens? I don't know. But I didn't know it was so widespread, and I had no idea. I thought it was like a Southern France, Spain thing.
Well, when we talk about, psychological archetypes or the depths of the shared.
And I can unshare screen, right?
Yeah, you just hover over down towards the bottom, and yeah. So when we talk about this idea that some of these myths arise because we share basically the same brain structures, and it sort of stands to reason that our brains respond to stimuli in similar ways. And so it's not really surprising to find us creating stories that respond to similar stimuli in similar ways. When we talk about the unconscious mind and the archetypes of the mind, caves are, you couldn't get a better physical representation of what an archetype is like than to crawl down in the dark for whatever hours and get down, and then light a fire and see geometric symbols and occasionally a representational animal or whatever. Like, you're almost like inside your own mind at that point. It's just so raw.
And with anthropological studies of hunter-gatherer cultures and how they do their rituals and rites of passage and hunting rituals, and because before you go on the hunt, you got to get together and you got to make sure the hunt goes well. So you have to drink, whatever this, and you got to take that, and you got to practice, do your magic. You got to do your magic to make sure that you have a good hunt. You got to propitiate the gods, or you got to thank. Maybe you have to thank the deer spirits for sacrificing themselves, or the pig spirit. I don't know. So, but there are lots of rituals, and if you go into that situation with that ritualistic, like it's your catechism, and they're guiding you, and they're telling you, and your worldview. So
this is how you become a man, son. Yeah. I'm going to take you down, son, and we're gonna make a man out of you today.
Yeah,
For real though.
And the rites are some of them are very brutal. I mean, where people die.
Yeah.
Some of it is exposure. Like, how long can you last? And if you don't, you really don't last. You die.
This is not really relevant. This is totally not relevant. But I just had a rite of passage in like Papua New Guinea, where they would choose one young man. They're like, there's like 20 new kids going through their rite of passage. They're all 13-year-olds, and they choose one of them, and they have like these dances, and it goes on for a long time, whatever. And then finally, it leads up to this thing where he goes into, there's a woman there, and she's like sitting back with her legs open, and he starts having sex with her. And as they're doing that, they kick the supports out from the roof, and it kills Amina. I don't know. This is death comes to us all, son. So enjoy your sex while it lasts, I guess. That has nothing to do at all with anything.
No, but it does have a little bit to do with just anthropology. From studies of anthropology, when we think about ancient peoples, hunter-gatherers that followed that kind of lifestyle, there tends to be brutality in a lot of the rituals.
Yeah.
And that's why they call it rites of passage. To get through it means you accomplish something.
I was thinking about this. Well, let's hold off on that for a while. But how even 50 years ago, our cartoons and everything were way more violent than they are now. We're sort of sublimating our violence, and I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah, I think the cultural representations. I mean, I'm a human beings are human, and we can pretend like things don't work the way they work, but when we do that, they just express themselves in ways.
Exactly.
That's what happens. You cannot eat, and you will go through a crazy experience and then eventually die. But it's.
So I just that whole Stone Age cave thing to me is profound, really profound.
And the use of caves increases over time. So
I wanted to I'll share. So the earliest caves that we have found are in South Africa, and it's called the Wonderwork Cave, and it's like 1 million years ago, and they think they found evidence of fire there. So that's what we were talking about last week, where people would gather fire and take it to a cave, and then that cave would kind of become the
Hestia, the hearth.
The hearth, yeah.
The mother fire, the first fire, the ever living flame. Yeah.
The Latin word for hearth is, I forget what it's called, but it was the same root as our word for focus. When we use the word focus in English, it's connected to the Latin word for hearth. So it becomes the focus of a community. The hearth
that makes sense, because the hearth is the focus of the home.
Yeah, and it's the safe space, right? You can travel out, but when you come back, you're protected, and you can cook food and stuff like that. Those are rock shelter, right? Those aren't the deep cave that Sam's talking about. The Wonderwork is one. The Wonderwork one, anyways, I think is a rock shelter. There are others that are more like the ones you're talking about. But I wanted to show you the very earliest artwork in the world, and it's from a cave. It's from a cave in Europe, from these the same periods that these Lascaux caves were from. And this little cave here, in the bottom here, that's a rock shelter. It doesn't have a secret passage that goes back down where people crawl in there and basically start manifesting their own archetypes in their conscious minds. But it's a rock shelter, and it was a home for fire. And this is the very first earliest work of art that we have at all ever over the world, Australia, Japan, it doesn't matter. This is the earliest thing. And it's carved ivory, and it's sort of small, fit in the palm of your hand. But it's meticulously carved. They've estimated it would take something like 400 hours of work. This is not easy to just whip out one of these things. And it's a hybrid. It's like the walking grizzly bears we were talking about. It's a lion man, I think. I can't see the thing, but it's upright and in a human form. And so you have to picture somebody in a cave around a fire, probably in a snowstorm when you can't go out because it's too cold, sitting around a fire, creating something out of the human imagination. It's not representational. It's not like he walked out and saw one of these, like, oh, I'm gonna carve that thing I saw. It's a pure act of imagination. He's imagining blends between humans and animals. And We don't know why. Is it a god? Maybe. Is it just him playing with his own archetype dream associations? Maybe. It kind of embodies this profound human need to create, need to express itself through creativity. One of the things I love most about Confucius is, Confucius, when he listed his 5 main virtues that society needed to function, it was goodness, like compassion, it was social structure, it was family relationships, it was looking at how your actions affect others, being sensitive to how you impact the others, and number 5 was art. And Native Americans would have agreed with this, Australian Aborigines, everybody would agree with this. We need to create, whatever your medium is, if it's music, if it's painting, if it's writing, whatever it is, and I'm speaking to this to the students of the class now, whatever you do in terms of your creativity, do it. Give it time. Let yourself be creative. It's needed for psychological health. So again, whether it's just creating a drum beat on your desk with your fingers like I just did, or playing an instrument, or creating something on PowerPoint, it doesn't matter at all. But use your creative, give yourself time every week to be creative, to play, and let yourself play. And that's not on Maslow's base hierarchy of needs, but it really should be. It's that deep. This is what our prehistoric ancestors did when they were in the caves and couldn't go outside. They played. They imagined things. Really, really, really healthy. So yeah, just wanted to.
Can I make a few comments or questions?
Yeah. Well, no. You're really kind of boring to me, Sam. I'm not really interested in what you say. So.
Oh. Well, so that's the first thing that humans made, right? Or is the first art ever made?
The first one that we have.
That we have. So
that isn't geometric or representational.
Yeah.
It's purely imaginative.
So you could say, so there's questions about the geometric. There were some questions about, does the geometric stuff mean anything? And then you have to ask the question of did those humans have the cognitive faculties to symbolically represent things with something as simple as a geometric shape? And you're telling me the first thing ever made was an animal that we have is an animal-human hybrid, which requires an incredibly complex theory of mind and understanding of human beings, and requires perhaps, I don't know, sort of the concept of spirit, maybe they're like these myths of different generations. So just that first piece of art says that human beings or the proto-humans were pretty damn complex.
Well, I was going to say this earlier, but it bugged me when you said that there's a scholarly debate on whether these symbols mean anything. I was like, academics piss me off sometimes. They're just so pointy-headed. Of course they mean something. Just because we don't know what it was doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right?
But they're saying, is it a script? They're saying, are they using the symbols like a script? And because we paint paintings, but what the hell does the paint? I mean, what does the painting mean? It doesn't mean Bob was here and then got 3 bushels of corn and then left some meat and took a bosom. It doesn't what it means. It's a picture.
Yeah,
that's what
but
it means.
The universality of some of those symbols, it's
it's really interesting, and I'm really like, when someone comes up with a convincing argument of how these symbols either spontaneously arose through similar circumstances and the same human psychology, essentially, or maybe it's, and there's also the mixture of both, because you can start with a similar origin and then over years diverge, and then when things change, I mean, that's how we have the alphabet. It's just one alphabet and it's all over the world.
So let me tell another cave story. I like this one a lot. I'll try to keep it short. I could actually stretch this out for quite a while, but I won't. But Prophet Muhammad, when his life, he's so interesting. And I love telling about Muhammad's life and about Islam in general. It's just one of my favorite things ever. But when he was 40, he was kind of well established. He had started out as kind of a foster kid or whatever, but by the time he was 40, he had married into a woman who was fairly successful, and he had time. And he would go to a cave and he would meditate in a cave, and sort of it was more of like a rock shelter, right? He wasn't crawling down into the bowels of the earth or anything, but he would go to this rock shelter and meditate. And in one of his meditations, an angel appeared and gripped him and made it so that he couldn't breathe and he was suffocating. And the angel let him go and said, write. And Muhammad said, I'm illiterate, I don't know how to write. And the angel squeezed him again, and he couldn't breathe again, and let him go again and said, write. And Muhammad said, I don't know how. I don't know if you heard me the first time. And it grabbed him again and let him go. And the third time said, write. And Muhammad was like, okay, I don't want to get squeezed again. So he just spoke the first things that came out of his deep subconscious mind. And what he spoke, he told later to his friends, and they wrote it down. And for the rest of his life, he would get these almost like, I don't know, seizures or something like that. But he would feel like he was just being overtaken, and that he would just speak without thinking. And people would write down what he said. And that is the Quran. The Quran is a collection of all of the things that he said in that spirit. And it began in a cave, and it has spread throughout the world from that cave, which is in Mecca. It's not far from Mecca. It's the cave of Hira in the mountains above Mecca. And from that cave, from that revelation, the Quran and the words of the Prophet have spread to 1.5 billion people. Started in a cave, and it's the foundation for the religion for, a huge number of people.
Yeah.
Do you know another cave story you want to tell?
Wait, I had something to say about Muhammad. What the hell? It was something good. It was the point about Islam. Oh, you were making the point. So that just like you said, when Muhammad would recite, those words were not his words. Those were not the words of Muhammad. Those were the words of God. So much so that in the traditions and the literature and the scholarship of Islam and the histories and all of the evidence, there's a very stark contrast between the words and opinions of Muhammad as a man.
Yeah.
Because people would come to him and say, hey, how do you think we should run this village? And he would tell them that's not the Quran.
Yeah.
Those are the opinions of Muhammad. And the people who talked to Muhammad, who got his opinions, who knew Muhammad and were of his generation, collected those sayings, and those were the hadith, the opinions of the Prophet, but not the words of God. And
Right.
And they talk about it like you can read the hadiths, which talk about Muhammad actually having a prophetic vision. So it's like the way the early Muslim community either remembered or
so Muhammad, it's like Muhammad says something and they write it down, and that's the Quran in the spirit. And then when it's over, somebody goes, what was that like? And he goes, oh, that was a trip. And that's a hadith.
It was a little bit like they didn't tell you what the words of God were. They were like, and Muhammad was having it was almost like you don't know what to call it. Like I don't know if there's an English word for it, but it's like a fit of prophecy, sort of like it's not him. And then and he said, well, you asked me about this. That's my opinion, not God's opinion, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so anyway, which is interesting because he was accused of being a poet because of the way he spoke, because it was much like an oral poet, like Homer, or in the same tradition of the Kalevala, the Finnish poets, oral poets.
Yeah. There are a lot of Muslim people who use that as an argument for the truth of Islam. And it might not make any sense to you because you're coming at it from a completely different point of view, but you will meet plenty of people who say, just read the Quran and you will realize that no human could write poetry like this. that is a very, very, very common thing for Muslims to say, and they believe it. It's hard for us to necessarily understand that, but it's very important to them.
I would say that they feel it. They're explaining a felt experience. They're not
Yes.
telling you a fact.
Yes, yes.
Right. So
100%.
that's another thing. Is you can say, well, clearly, I mean, you can just translate it well. I mean, blah blah. You know, but then you hear it.
I was trying to describe the Passover Seder today to a class of older students who are mostly Christians. But when you talk about the Passover Seder, you could say, well, it's it's when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt or whatever, and every year Jews celebrate the Passover Seder. That's like a definition of it. But if you're a Jew and every spring your aunts and uncles come over and you have the rituals and the prayers and there's the wine, there's crazy cousin Steve, and there's the gifts, and there's the whole entire thing. When you say Seder to a Jew, it conjures up a universe for them of lived experience that it does not do for a Christian. So like to translate the word, you have to translate a whole culture, you can't really do it.
And if it's poetry, you really need to hear how it's performed to understand the effect of it. That's the whole point. I've just recently started to be able to read some of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it's really awesome in Greek. And of course, like if you're going to read the Bible, if you read the Greek, it really blows your mind, and you go, oh, there's that nuance thing and this and that. And you understand just from word choice and different things. But when you hear it, and you realize that epic poetry or spoken poetry was spoken in rhythm. They had music. It was, and
the Quran's the same way. I went down to celebrate the birthday of the Quran with our Muslim community, and they had these hafiz.
Yeah,
the people who
recite the Quran.
Yeah, they recite the Quran, and like it would go on. I got bored. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's just, to me, it's boring after 2 or 3 minutes. But they would go for a half hour, and this person would be doing it, and it's all the cadence and the rhythm. And if you know Arabic, it means something to you. But if you don't, you just, like me, just like wondering how long it's going to go on for.
Well, right, but if you were to hear, it's just like when you have a good translation of something, you go, oh man, yeah, that really brought, Don Quixote or, whatever to life or something, or Shakespeare, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have any really good, English versions of that, but it's like, pick your favorite story and put it into verse, and then have somebody come along and sing that story around a campfire, for a couple hours. It activates your imagination, right? You're listening, all of your the way that you're processing the story is through your ears, and the rest of your brain is imagining it to go along. Oral tradition very much engages the imagination of the people. It's not like a movie where you don't have to imagine everything's shown to you, and there's very little left to the imagination in oral tradition. And that's why I'm having you guys do podcasts, so that you can engage your ears the way that people used to, and in the listening you could try to recreate the story as you go along. But yeah, so do you have any other cave stories, really briefly? It's 6:17. Well, if you have another cave story.
Nothing super. I mean, okay. Keep talking about nothing crazy. See.
So I did want to pause and see if there's time for any questions, because those can occasionally kick us off on a whole new entire vista that neither Sam or I had ever even imagined. So are there questions or comments about any of this? Anything you'd like us to comment on, or something that you may have run across, or
correct us, let us know.
Or correct, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or like you totally blew it there. Which happens. Alexis, I'm gonna single you out and see what's on your mind.
I really enjoyed this week's discussion topic of caves and mountains because they are so prevalent in mythology and biblical texts, and like even learning about the creation stories from the past couple weeks, just like the idea of like rock formations and all those things. It's just I don't think we realize it until you really look into it, how important these things are and what they represent, which is really interesting and mind-boggling too. And for this week's discussion, I kind of strayed from like the myth, but went to Plato and his Allegory of the
Oh,
Cave,
yeah,
because
Allegory of the Cave, yeah.
because I felt that was really important in like how we view myths and how we perceive our humanity and our thought process and everything. So I thought that was a fun thing to contribute to the discussion. And
So in layman's terms, and you don't need to, this is not a philosophy class, and and I don't care how you understand that story, rightly or wrongly. But for those students in the class who may not know what you're talking about, when you talk about Plato's Allegory of the Cave, can you just say in 30 seconds what it means to you?
To me, it's how you view life. It's, the glass half full, the glass empty, the full glass. That's kind of what I get from it. But you can look into it deeper to like maybe like the social construct of how we view ourselves in the world around us, to like the influences that we have. Because in the story itself, it's like a group of people, but then one man strays to discover what the world really is. So I feel like you could take it in different directions, but that's pretty much what I take from it and value from it.
Good. Good.
Such a good one.
Sam, you want to comment on the Allegory of the Cave just briefly? We want to sort of.
Yeah, I mean, it's along the same lines of like, are you pessimistic or optimistic? Are you seeing the world in its true light, or are you not? Are you seeing just shadows on the wall, or are you seeing the thing itself? That has, you can go from there 1,000 different ways. But that's kind of like what I remember from it, is the people in the cave are seeing the shadows on the wall, where the person who goes out sees the sun, I guess. I don't know.
So let me take it even back a step even further. The Allegory of the Cave is there's a fire, and there's a group of people facing away from the fire, and they're watching the shadows that they themselves cast on a wall. And they're thinking that the shadows are people, the real people. And the philosophers have puzzled over this forever. And I don't care, actually. I don't care about philosophy. I'm not a philosopher, and whatever it is.
I know there's a philosophic answer to this, but it's not a mythological answer. It's like what the people say about Plato's philosophy. But it's not mythology. It's like, Aristotelian philosophy. It's not a story.
Yeah.
It's their interpretation of his philosophy.
But it's kind of almost like a social commentary. Like what we think is real isn't really real.
Yeah.
And you could use examples like fame, like or money or power. We think these are great, important things, and they're really just not. Or other people's opinions of us. We're watching the shadows of, it's like, the great celebrities and the people who have money and power. And we're watching the drama of life and imagining ourselves into it, when we could just get up and walk outside and look at nature. Just
the thing itself. Yeah.
The thing itself. Yeah.
And if you connect it to the sort of like, well, the levels, I guess maybe not. Well, anyway, but like the seeing, anyway, I'll leave it.
So Sam, I wanted to tell you that student Alexis, who was just talking about the Allegory of the Cave, she's taken all my classes. She's a humanities major, and this is, I think, the last class she could take. And she went to the Holy Land, and she went to the Mount of Temptation, where Satan led Jesus up onto the mountaintop and said, and gave him the 3 temptations. And she brought me back a little tiny baggie full of dirt from the Mount of Temptation. And I have it in my office there. And I just look at it and I think, oh my God, I have actual dirt from the mountains and caves of temptation, where Jesus was taken up to the top of this place and said, I'll give you wealth, power, money, anything you want. And he said, nah, I don't need those things. I'm good.
That's so cool. Right now I'm getting, it's a tangent. We don't know. I'm getting into like reading the book of James, and it's starting to make me go and, checking out stuff like that. And James has everything in it, connecting to every other part of Jesus's life.
Oh, I love James.
Yeah.
James is probably my favorite book of the New Testament.
It's mine now, currently.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's powerful. Gosh darn, James doesn't pull any punches at points in there. So anyways, other comments about mountains or caves or anything else from Cam or Doy or Lauren or Chloe or Nick or
I don't have any questions or anything, but I wanted to say I've really been appreciating listening to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lauren. I know
I
can
agree. Sorry, go ahead.
I know I can speak for Sam in saying we really, really appreciate it. That's meaningful to both of us.
I just want to say I agree with Lauren, and that description of the allegory of the cave was the best thing I've ever heard. If you would have asked me to do it in 30 seconds, I would have just said, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. See, that's why I love it when you guys talk, because you teach each other. Like, there's this idea that me or Sam or whatever has all the information and we bestow it upon you out of the bounty of our, whatever. And the reality is you guys teach each other all the time and get inspired by each other all the time. And so I really appreciate, when students talk to us or talk to each other. Alexis, your understanding of the cave, Nick just said was the greatest interpretation you ever heard. So, Kim, I know you were trying to say something. Were you gonna say something?
Just kind of back to the topic of caves. I just found it really interesting, especially when I was reading through some of the discussion stories and people's kind of interpretation on what caves represent throughout mythology and stories and history. And I feel like in my mind, caves can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, like what they represent. Like it could represent obviously darkness or despair, or the walls closing in around you, literally and metaphorically. But I also feel like
COVID, Zoom, your bedroom in COVID, Zoom.
Yeah. But I also feel like kind of on the flip side to that, caves in like certain religions and whatnot can be seen as life-giving, or kind of almost like in a book I read, like the womb of the earth. Almost like I was reading a book basically about all the stories of the mother goddess throughout history, throughout religion and mythology, and like all the way back in the not Mesopotamian area, the Paleolithic period, where they found some of the oldest statues depicting the mother goddess in primarily these caves, like in France and Spain, primarily France. And like there are these caves where they primarily find them like shaped like you're walking into the womb of the mother goddess. Yeah, exactly. So I just found that really interesting that they can be depicted like that too, especially and like have that such impact and of importance in certain societies. I just found that really interesting.
So we just learned that all mother goddesses are mountain goddesses, and all caves are goddesses, and it represents so it literally from top to bottom, right? It's the
And it's a woman. A woman is at the beginning and the end, which
what
is
about Jonah and the whale? Would the whale be like a womb of transformation or something like that? Or
I've heard it spoken of that way. That's kind of a little bit of a unique story. I know of an Inuit story that's similar, but caves are often, in my reading, often connected to wombs. Going into a cave is psychologically returning to the birth chamber.
Well, the myth I was telling you, the way Wainamoinen is born finally, is he crawls out of a crevice a crevice of the earth, which is his mother or whatever, and it explains that he has to battle his way, and it's like he's crawling out, and it's like the word. It's clearly birth.
He clearly
It's coming out of the ground, and he's describing it much like a cave. It's a cave
Yeah.
coming out of. So that's the end of that first chapter. It's a cool, it's a fun little story. Anyway.
We have one more. We have 2 minutes and one more person to check in with. So Chloe, do you have anything you want to throw out there?
No, other than I just really enjoyed the discussion this week. I've been really enjoying Sam discussing with us. It was different from the day you weren't here, and I do really enjoy you coming. So it's been nice. And then seeing your daughter last week, that was super cute. I was like low-key hoping we would see her again this week, but we didn't. But,
Can I bring her down? Can I bring her down? I'll show her before I can bring her down.
yes.
Yeah, hold on.
1 minute.
One
Go.
minute.
Quick. But I did for my discussion this week, I learned about Mount Fuji in Japan. Which
Yeah.
I thought it was just so cool because just Japan has just a different outlook on mountains that's
For sure.
really surrounded in their culture. So I just thought that was really cool. Just like it's kind of like for us, we have tons of mountains everywhere, so we associate a lot with mountains also. It's interesting.
Japan, that their religion is Shinto, and we won't go into this at all, but they associate mountaintops with a high level of what they call kami, or spirit, and all mountain tops are almost revered in Japan. And Fuji, of course, is a little bit like Shasta, from what I understand. It's just this dominant mountain that for hundreds of miles around, you look around and you see Fuji. And so it's just this outsized, there you go.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. Eleanor. Oh. Right, that's her name, Eleanor?
Eleanor Daphne.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, she's just rolling over for the first time from, she hasn't figured out how to roll over from her stomach to her back, and
She did once today.
she did it.
She just hasn't figured out how to do it.
She's looking at everybody like, what's going on?
Yeah, say
Who's that?
say hi, Jason. You want to come down and hang out?
Yes, me and Tanya are on our way. I get my second COVID vaccination and we're coming down. I know, Laura, you had said that, and I was like, oh, I should have said that right in the first post, but yes, Tanya and I are coming down, so get ready for us. As soon as my vaccination time passes, whatever, it's 20 days or whatever,
Yeah.
we're there.
We're ready for you.
And I'll get to meet that little one.
Aren't
So
you?
She's been
Tanya
kind
will,
of in a COVID cave herself. She hasn't really seen anyone. She really, just been kind of us.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and stop this. We're not going to get off, but I'm going to stop just for the purposes of time.